Welcome to the AM Update, Week in Review. A collection of the best moments from Aaron McIntire's morning update.
Vice President JD Vance, as part of his interview on Fox News on Sunday, went through what's at stake in great detail with not only redistricting, but the proposed new census, which I've made it clear, and I think you probably agree, needs to happen sooner rather than later. Here he is laying out in great detail what he thinks the aftermath of those actions, taking a new census and redistricting to the nth degree in red states, will actually have on the future of the country.
Yeah, so another crazy thing that I had no idea about, but everybody, even Democrats actually admit this, that the census in 2020 had a major statistical error. And what that meant is that you actually undercounted a few states that are Republican, like Florida and Ohio. You overcounted some blue states. And so what I understand, if you actually did the census anew right now, you would have 10 additional Republican seats and 9 fewer Democrat seats. And really what we're living with, Maria, is the consequence of 40 years of institutional control in the Democratic Party. These guys have fought very dirty for a very long time, and they haven't just won elections and enacted laws that we may not agree with. They have tried to rig the game for Democrats and against Republicans. And thankfully, under President Trump's leadership, you finally see some spine. You finally see some backbone in the Republican Party to fight back against these very aggressive Democratic dirty tricks. But the only way for us to do it is to actually go and do the hard work to reset the scales a little bit. What we want to do is redo the census, but importantly, we want to redistrict some of these red states, and we want to make the congressional apportionment fair in this country. Again, you cannot do it unless Republicans actually take some very decisive action in the months to come. We think they will, and we're obviously supporting them every step of the way.
But do you worry that as Republicans do that, the Democrat blue states are going to do the same thing, and then you'll have redistricting in California, New Jersey, and so on?
You know, Maria, there's just not a whole lot of juice left out of that lemon. The Democrats have already gone as far as they possibly can. Let me give you a crazy statistic. So I believe that it's in New Jersey, Illinois, New York, California, and there's one other Democrat state where you take those 5 states, you have a large number of Democrat representatives. But here's the crazy statistic. President Trump won 43% of those 5 states, and Democrats have something like 85% of the representatives out of those states. You cannot gerrymander these far left states anymore, and that's the whole point. We have unilaterally disarmed in the Republican Party. We have said to the Democrats, if you want to rig the game in your favor in blue states, go ahead. We're going to do nothing to fight back against it. That's crazy. It makes it harder for us to pass our agenda. It makes it harder for us to win elections. And most importantly, it gives Democrats this ability to run roughshod over the country without any pushback from the American people. The democratic system in this country is broken because who you vote for doesn't necessarily get reflected in who your representatives are. We're just trying to rebalance the scales and, frankly, push back against a very unfair system created by the Democrats.
That is Vice President JD Vance just laying out in detail the plans, or at least the proposals, for what he envisions happening in the next year or so when it comes to redistricting and hopefully getting a new census done. Now, censuses, especially in a country hundreds of millions of people strong like the United States, that's going to take a while. There's always hope that it can be done sooner than later. But I want to focus in on a couple of things that he talked about there. Number one, what Republicans have done to unilaterally disarm themselves. They have allowed for the last generation of politics in this country to just allow the Democrats to, number one, count illegals in the census to inflate the populations of states, even though illegals are not citizens, so they should not be counted in a census, but yet they are anyway. And on top of that, Democrats have gone to the nth degree to gerrymander the heck out of their states, while Republicans do nothing because that's not fair. And we're just so much better than the Democrats, aren't we, when it comes to political maneuvering? So much more principled. So that's the first thing. Republicans, I'm sure this will be a shock to absolutely no one, but Republicans have majored in shooting themselves in the foot. The other thing that I want to focus in on from what JD Vance was talking about there, he said, he dropped this little phrase in there, these are the things we need to focus on, quote, in the coming months. I don't think that was accidental. I don't think that was a slip of the tongue at all. If Republicans allow any of these actions any of these redistricting attempts, whether it's in Florida or Texas or Indiana, Missouri, I think I saw as well. If Republicans allow any of these redistricting efforts or any attempt at a new census to just get punted down the road, another 90-day extension, another day or week of waiting for Democrats to show up in Texas, looking at you, Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton. If we just allow this to just be kicked down the road, any of these efforts to be kicked down the road, we're going to get kicked in the mouth in 2028. I really believe that, unless the economy is just roaring. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Republicans to completely reset the field. It's not immoral to gerrymander if you're in a red state. It really is not. It's just not. If we were all playing by an unwritten set of rules, that we actually respected each other, and we were really on the same team here, we're all on Team America, then yes, maybe, just for the good of the country, for the good of the social compact, maybe you should respect some arbitrary fairness markers. But we don't live in that country. You just heard J.B. Pritzker earlier on in this episode had absolutely no defense for Illinois' congressional district. But that's the world that they made, and that's the world that they're going to have to lay down in. So make them lay down in that bed that they made. I just fear if these things that they're talking about, whether it's the census, and especially the redistricting, if this is not done in short order, and I mean the wheels are in motion before the midterms, I fear they're never going to get done. And Republicans, the Republican Party at large, is going to squander a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to completely reset the board of electoral politics in this country. There's everything to gain and everything to lose. Everything to gain, probably Republican control of your federal government for the foreseeable future. Everything to lose, no more Republican control ever. I think that's what's at stake here. And we can't see any more dragging of the feet. Let's get busy living, get busy dying, get busy counting heads, but not the ones who are here illegally.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
The world and our country said goodbye to a beloved astronaut on Friday, Jim Lovell, commander of Apollo 13, portrayed by Tom Hanks in the movie of the same name. 4-time spaceflight veteran was Jim Lovell. His work inspired millions. Courage under pressure, as depicted in that aforementioned movie, helped forge the United States' path to the moon and beyond. Of course, you'll recall he and the crew of Apollo 8 read Genesis 1 on Christmas Eve in 1968 during a live televised broadcast.
And for all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters."
That is Christmas Eve, 1968. Astronauts Jim Lovell and the crew of Apollo 8 reading Genesis 1 during a live televised broadcast. I was just watching a speech that Jim Lovell gave a few years ago, talking about the first time he went up into space and was far enough away from planet Earth that he could hold out his finger and block out the entire planet with just his thumb. And he talked about how it crystallized for him in that moment. What I think is one of the best explanations or examples of general revelation that our Creator has given us. And what is general revelation? Special revelation is scriptures, basically. General revelation is revelation that everyone has access to, that you can look around and you can see that God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. And there is fingerprints of God's handiwork all around us through creation. And Jim Lovell said the first time that he went up high enough or far enough away into space that he could block out the entire planet that he is from just with his thumb. He said it crystallized something for him about general revelation. That we grew up on this planet, this speck in the universe that just so happens to have a perfect atmosphere, that just so happens to have a perfectly balanced atmosphere, that just so happens to have a magnetic field to protect it from radiation from deep space. That just so happens to be just far enough away, not too far, not too close, away from the star in which it orbits, that it doesn't burn up and it doesn't go cold. And he said in that moment, looking back at Earth, that he could just block out with his thumb. That just very obvious truth, that the obvious fingerprints of an intelligent creator, singular creator, that became crystallized for him. Not too many people can share that sort of perspective. Not too many people have been far enough away from our planet where something like that with the general revelation and just how perfectly intricate and right on time and just in the right place our planet is. Not too many people have that sort of perspective. And Jim Lovell shared that perspective not too long ago. We talked about this in passing last week, but even over the weekend, much ado has been made about the fates of those people working in computer programming. Even lawyers. Had that clip last week from, I think it was David Friedman, talking about how AI models need to be certified. They need to be, if they can pass the bar exam, they need to be made certified lawyers, whatever that means. There was a story over the weekend about a Zoomer. She's a citizen of this country who actually worked hard to go to a nice college. I think it was an Ivy League school even. It was some prestigious school. And she worked to get a degree in computer engineering, a gifted, by all accounts, programmer. And now she cannot find a job at Chipotle. And how her story is probably going to be replicated as AI becomes more and more ubiquitous, leading to more and more people's jobs getting replaced. People's jobs like those in the programming industry, computer programming. I actually do not think long-term that those jobs will be in jeopardy. Maybe lawyers, but I kind of doubt that as well. I think there's going to be some protectionism going on there if these AI models can be advanced to the point where we'd actually even consider, in a serious thought and a serious conversation, replacing real-life lawyers with computers. But here's why I don't think programmers, coders at all need to worry in the long run. Yes, these AI models can write code, and they can write code very well, very efficiently, very quickly, much quicker than a human programmer, a human coder. So yes, that is a problem in the short term. But in the long term, as these models become more and more sophisticated, guess what also needs to be more and more sophisticated? The prompts. The prompts that tell these models what to do, what to code, how to code it. Those prompts are going to have to become more and more sophisticated. For one reason alone, is that I don't think you're ever going to have anything approaching sentience. So you're always going to have an external inputter. You're going to have an external prompter, a human prompter. And guess what I also think is maybe a secondary or third order impact of this as well. Basically, a lot of these models work by putting in English and getting back code, getting back some sort of artistic expression, getting back something that is not straight up English in a lot of cases. Guess what's going to have to be refined? Your ability to write, your syntax, your grammar, your English skills, as these prompts need to become more and more tailored, more and more specific, more and more descriptive. If anything, I could foresee a future where the people who are most gifted or the people who are most capable with AI chat boxes, with generative AI, fill in the blank, whether it's chat boxes or any of these other tools, the people who are most capable with those tools are actually really good English speakers, really good writers, really vivid writers. Because I think those skills are actually going to become more and more in demand as these prompts have to be more and more specific. So I was thinking about this over the weekend, and yes, it is sad. I do have compassion for Zoomers, millennials, what have you, who actually obeyed what they were told their entire lives, get a job in computer programming, go to school for computer programming, and now their jobs are probably going to be replaced, if they aren't already, by H-1B visa holders. I do have compassion for that. But I do think long-term that all is not lost when it comes to AI and programming specifically.
You're listening to the AM Update, Week in Review. Follow on X and Instagram at Real AM Update.
And finally, our poll of the week. I asked you, will Trump attempt to rein in crime in places like Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York City? I gave you 4 options. Yes, please. No, that's setting a terrible precedent, sending in the federal, basically, troops into these blue cities. Will that be weaponized against us at some point in the future? The third option I gave you, no, there will be a strongly worded truth about doing the same thing to D.C., like in places like Chicago. That's all we're going to get, a strongly worded truth. And then the fourth option, I gave you the ability to say that you're conflicted and spell out why you're conflicted in the comments. In first place, yes, please, at 45.6%. Yes, please send in the National Guard or do something to rein in control, get the scum off the streets of major cities, even if they're blue cities. In second place, 24% said no, that's a terrible precedent. In third place, 20% said no, all we're going to get is a strongly worded truth. And in fourth place, I'm conflicted at 10%. So we'll start with what you said. Nate Sell said, I'm conflicted. I get this needs to be done. I guess he just does it, and we hope for the best for the future, if there is a future. That's an interesting response, Nate, because I think you understand why I put in the option for no, this is a terrible precedent. But I'm kind of where you are, just on a moral level. If you have the ability to fight evil, then you should fight it. If you have the power vested in you by the people to fight evil, which is what crime is, it's a form of evil and sin, then you should do it, I think. And yeah, there's a possibility that could be weaponized somehow, some way in the future, but you kind of take your risks. Hopefully you don't give people the power to do anything bad with that power in the future. Bob says, I don't see how the feds can go into any city and just take it over, even though the cities need it. There's ways to do it. You could declare an emergency somehow, some way. You could send them in under the auspice of defending ICE officers. You could do that. Will in Wisconsin says, you forgot my favorite option. He'll tweet law and order over and over again. Don't give me PTSD, Will. Zealous says you get around to Sanctuary City fighting deportations. Yes, this is kind of what I was saying. If you want to wink and nod, send in the National Guard to these big blue cities, do it under the auspices that you're doing so to protect immigration and customs enforcement employees. Rhino says, how about just hold up Fed funding and let their residents handle it? This looks like a police state. Looks like a police state? I don't know. Just getting the actual criminals off the street is not a police state. A police state is when police are coming to your door and arresting you for unjust things. That's a police state. Jim says, I would support Trump taking action to rein in crime in blue cities, but I don't think he'll mobilize the troops or federal law enforcement. He'll offer those troops, bait Dems into refusing help, and then use that refusal against them in the midterms. Yep, that's a brilliant political ploy. I don't know if it's the moral thing to do, but that is a very brilliant political ploy. Liberty says, sounds kind of like martial law. No thanks. Though with these cities' voters, if they cared enough to elect leaders, to do it themselves. Yeah. Martial law, that's not... Martial law is when you got to be off the streets by a certain time. Martial law is basically a lockdown. You can't go anywhere. You don't have freedom of movement. That's not what they're doing in D.C. They're just getting the riffraff off the street. Doesn't mean you don't have freedom of movement, but if you're committing a crime, you're going to get arrested for it. That's how far from the tree that D.C. has fallen. That we think that federalizing D.C. means martial law. No, it just means actually doing the job law enforcement should have been doing in the first place. Valeria says, could he actually rein in other blue cities? I don't know. Rein in God Emperor Governor Janet Mills and her socialist drug cult? Maybe. Please, we'd be happy to send Trump some lobsters afterwards. So Valeria says, yes, please. Spang says 1 in 5 thinks fighting crime is a terrible precedent. Holy bleep, Batman, we got a problem in Gotham. How did the final, so it actually ended up about 1 in 4 respondents said that this is setting a bad precedent. But Spang says, no, you're looking at this the wrong way. Fighting crime is the prime directive here. There's nothing wrong with that. Couple more. Don't drone me, bro. Says maybe if things get out of control in those cities. Dalton says Trump should continue with the practice he started in L.A., bringing the guard to protect federal properties. Josh says I really hope he does, but if he won't, but it won't do any good. These are Dem-run cities. He'll do it, and it'll improve the lives of the citizens in those cities, so they'll continue to vote for communists and Democrats. But I repeat myself. That was kind of what I was talking about the other day. I think the calculation that you're making over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the risk that you're taking is rewarding citizens of those cities for continuing to vote for terrible people who got them in that position in the first place? The reward might be, and I think this is a small chance at a reward, if you successfully clean those cities up, if you successfully do that, maybe people will come around to, hey, maybe he's got some great ideas on some other things. Maybe the communists that kept promising Valhalla, maybe they're up to no good. I think there's a very small chance of that happening if Trump were to go into other Democrat cities.
This has been the AM Update Week in Review. The AM Update will be back on Monday and every weekday at 4 a.m. Eastern Time.